From the Dallas On Air studios in beautiful Dallas, Texas, this is Fulfillment right here on DallasOnAir.com. And now here's your host, the Vega Bomber, PJ Dunn.
All right, welcome. I'm back. Yes, welcome to the Fulfillment Show. This is the show where we discuss all things film. We talk about movie chatter, movie collecting items, all this stuff. This is something that we love to do here on this channel. So if you love movies to that degree to where you want to talk about them forever and ever and ever, and while you drive your friends crazy, then this is definitely the show for you. So this is episode 8, and this is season 4. So we've been doing this now, okay, Zach? Gosh, 4 years and counting.
That's correct, man.
Yeah. How about that? And so today's the topic we're going to talk about is going to be about directors then and now. Have they gotten better? Have they stagnated? Or did they get worse? But before I do that, I need to introduce my trusty and completely competent co-host, and that would be KZ.
That's a matter of subjectivity. Welcome to DallasOnAir.com. Thank you for tuning into the show.
That's right. We're going to start this show off right, and we're going to kill people with kindness, and maybe you too while we're sitting out there. So I am the Vega Bomber. I am just your movie tour guide throughout this stuff. I've always loved movies, and now we're sharing that love of movies with you. So to get a good sense of things, we're going to start off with our first segment. So if you're new here, the first segment is Just Seen It. And with Just Seen It, what we're doing is just telling you what we've seen here lately since the last show. Because, we're watching stuff, whether it be TV or something with the theaters themselves. And that's our wiki right there for sure. So, okay, Zach, let's just start with you, man. What have you been watching since we last talked?
All right. Well, there's nothing really out in the theaters that I really wanted to see. So when you kind of get into that mode, you kind of go back to either the stuff that you've seen over and over again, or you go for something that you haven't seen.
Yep.
I went for a classic that I had never seen. Just one of those that's been on the list, on the pile for years. Just one of those, like, it keeps winding up in the list on the DVR or on your Netflix list. So anyway, my choice was the 1962 film Whatever Happened to Baby Jane.
Oh my gosh.
This is a legendary psychological horror film starring Bette Davis and Joan Crawford. It's the setting of the TV series Feud on FX a couple of years back. This is the story of two sisters who kind of grew up in the Hollywood system. One a child star, the other one who becomes a film star in later life. Bette Davis playing the former child star, Joan Crawford playing the movie star. Anyway, a terrible accident happens, and Joan's sister, the film star, Joan Crawford, is involved in an accident that basically paralyzes her, which appears to be the fault of her baby sister, Baby Jane. Baby Jane is now forced to take care of her sister, and Bette Davis, Baby Jane, just basically drives her older sister crazy because of the jealousy and because of just an erotic thing. These two women are just trapped in this house and just tormenting. Bette Davis just tormenting her sister because she has to take care of her and just kind of driving her down psychologically. Meanwhile, all Joan Crawford's character wants to do is escape and get out because, get the appreciation of her fans because she's had this wonderful movie career after her sister was so successful.
Right.
It's just a really kind of sordid and dark crime thriller of two people just trapped in a house and trapped by circumstance. Baby Jane wants to get out and have the big career and the big show and things like that. Joan Crawford just wants to get out from under her sister's thumb. And it's the two of them just kind of at heads the whole time. Terrible scenes of, just leaving rats on trays and things like that and starving this poor woman, just keeping both of them as a prisoner in this house, both by circumstance and by physical limitation. And you see how this film kind of really informs later classics like Misery and things like that.
Okay.
And just getting just those terrible, those terrible sibling rivalry films. This is a really just influential film in the way that it's shot, because it's black and white. There's a because it has taste of film noir. There's murders and there's mayhem, and there's just the absolute creep factor of Bette Davis's character trying to hold on to being a child and someone who never really grew up, but she's aged and decrepit and things like that.
Yeah.
And you have Joan Crawford, who's just absolutely tormented. I mean, this film, just it's lauded for a reason. It's one of those legendary films for a reason. The two of these women absolutely hated each other on set. It's a legendary rivalry, but more than that, it made for just a good, creepy film. If you're in the mood for a good, creepy film, this is definitely one to go back and check out.
Interesting. Okay.
It's campy as hell.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. It's campy as hell. It
was made in the 60s, right?
Yeah. But by the same token, there's still just a camp factor, but it lends to an even creepier factor.
Wow.
Just, with the makeup and the lighting and things like that. It is the terrible tale of two people trapped in a situation, and it just gets really, really good.
Yeah.
I can't recommend it highly enough going to see it once. It's not one of those films that you want to see over and over again, but it's definitely one of those films that you should see once to say that you've seen it.
Okay. Yeah. It's like everybody should go to Mardi Gras at least once, right?
Exactly.
Well, you know what? That's a good pick because, I'm in that same spot too, except for I actually did have a movie to go see that I couldn't wait to go see.
Oh, you've been excited about this one for a long time.
I have. The Northman is the film that I saw, and I went to go see it in the theater. And so I can tell you now that this is something that, and I saw this with the film Samurai, so we both went and saw this together. So it was just fun. So
shout outs to Carlos.
Yes, shout outs to Carlos. And the thought is here that when you think about the Northman, you're going to run into a couple of things. So first of all, let me just tell you the story, and then I'll tell you kind of the thing around it. So it is a revenge tale. It is set in the Viking lore of the 10th century, right? So it's completely different than anything we know now. So the pacing is going to follow such. You have actors like Alex Skarsgård in this film, who is jacked and shredded and just sells rage. This guy is in a rage the whole film because of what happens to his father, who's killed by his uncle. This follows Hamlet. Hamlet, though, William Shakespeare got this from the actual story of Amleth, which is what this is. You're seeing Alexander Skarsgård play Amleth, who is the boy who watches his father get killed by his uncle, and then he goes away, he's able to escape. And he's coming back because all he's been thinking about this whole time is how he's going to pay back his uncle for what he did to his dad and perhaps what he did to his mom as well. So this film, shot beautifully. I can't tell you, Zach, how almost every scene, the way when it's lined up for you to see the whole land of Ireland, because that's where it was shot, which is interesting. You have this beautiful land with horrible people. But the shots are basically could be easily paintings that you'd go by that'd be curated in a hoity-toity museum, because the way he lines back up and says, I want to show you where they're at. So the landscapes, the vistas, all this other stuff helps to sell this idea that it's supposed to be in Scandinavia, Iceland, but this idea here of just pulling back and just saying, look, I want you to see this. And then the acting. That's the other great part about this. Skarsgård is there. Now, they don't speak a whole lot in those days, not like the way we're used to speaking today, obviously, where we're posting stuff all the time. And so most of the time he's emoting through just his face and his eyes when things happen. And you're just going, that's ridiculous. So Anya Taylor-Joy is awesome in this film as Olga, as one of the sorceresses he meets on the way to figuring out how he's going to go pay back his uncle. Nicole Kidman plays his mom. Willem Dafoe is in this, who plays a jester, a court jester to his father, and he's absolutely weirded out crazier than he was in Spider-Man with that Goblin thing, a Goblin helmet on, and when he took it off to just show his face to be crazy, he's like this as this jester the whole time in this movie. I just wish that there were more of him. And so in this film, I'd say the thing that's probably the sticking point is that you want to see Ethan Hawke more because he's in it, but he's the dad, so he's got to die. You want to see Bjork more, which is why I'm wearing this shirt today, because she's in it and she's playing this Circe. So she's this almost oracle person who's trying to tell him, remember what you have to do. Remember what you have to do for what happened to your dad. And then, of course, you have that wonderful Claes Bang, who plays the uncle. And I tell you, between Skarsgård and him and Ethan Hawke, the acting level's way past 10. The costuming is great. The soundtrack is great, and the sound design. Now, what's the rub for this film for some people? Well, they're not using cell phones, and they're not making Marvel jokes every 5 seconds. And this lets you sit in that land and see. And the sound design is so good that you get chills just hearing Skarsgård every time he pulls the sword out of that sheath. It's its own like personality, his sword, in a way.
Okay.
And so when you get this depth, most people, it's going to fly over their head and go, this is boring. Why are Vikings aren't good people. You'll hear people go there. And I get that. And they're saying, well, should we really cheer violence? But at the same time, it's history. This is kind of based off of a real, true Norse story about this man named Amleth, which, by the way, Amleth, you can see where William Shakespeare was working that.
Yeah.
So I'm saying, if you can just sit down and just look at the beauty of this film, and then the sound design, and then watch the acting going ahead, you can probably forget that maybe the mysticism parts that they put in here that kind of seem kind of out of place in some places actually makes sense, because it shouldn't follow a Hollywood formula. We're talking about the 10th century.
Right.
We're talking about Vikings.
And it's a legend telling.
Yes, absolutely. So thoroughly enjoyed. I would tell people, go see it. Again, if you're just used to the current cinema and the way films are done today, you might have some issues. But if you're a real film fan, a cinephile, you're going to say, I love it. Give me more. So Robert Eggers did this, and we know he did The Witch, which is a great film. I don't know if you've seen that one, but also starring Anya Taylor-Joy. And he also did The Lighthouse, which I couldn't sit through that one long enough, although I could say that it was wonderfully crafted. And so to me, in terms of best films, it's between The Northman and The Witch. And I'm probably going to lean towards Northman.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still on the fence as to whether to see this, just because this film just looks so friggin' bleak, and it has that kind of Lord of the Rings feel, where I don't know if it's kind of we're getting a little exhausted of this, but by the same token, I know that Eggers is a master of tone.
Yes.
So it seems like it's in place, but by the same token, I need to be kind of convinced that this is one. Is this one to actually see in a theater, or is this one
you
that I
have to see it in the theater?
Okay.
And when you see it, don't see it standard. Go see it in the Dolby, because the sound design
Right.
is spectacular. It is,
Okay.
absolutely. So the
All
sound
right.
design and the score. So
Okay.
sometimes people talk about the score or they talk about the sound design. I
Yeah.
would say both of these are on 10, and then the visuals will just blow you the F away.
Okay. All right.
So this is a film where you actually get immersed, and you're transported from 2022 April 24th back to the 10th century.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so I would say so for sure.
Ringing endorsement. Cool.
Yeah. So what did you guys think? Have y'all seen either of these films? And if so, why don't you just tell us in the comment section, and we'll meet you down there in the comment section and tell you what we thought as well of your thoughts. How about that? So we're willing to do something like that. So let's get into the main topic. Let's get into the gravy here on this. So today we are talking about directors. We're looking at them from a then and now perspective. We're going to look at their first film. So we've picked 3 directors, and then we're going to look at their latest film, and then we're going to just look at their trajectory. How was it? Did it go well? Do we still love these guys as much as we did the first time we saw them or the last time we saw them? And that's what we'll figure out. So, Kazak, let's go with you first. Who popped up in your mind when you're thinking of directors?
All right.
Then and now.
All right. Let me get this graphic up here. Let me get myself on screen. There we go. All right. So, like I said, there were a lot of directors that we could have gone in any direction on this. And like I said, this is one of those topics that is worth visiting and visiting again, depending on how we go. For the first one that I wanted to pick, I needed to pick one that I'd really seen the first one and the last one on. That was a big thing. My first one is going to be Sam Raimi. Now we've got to start with the first film that we're going basically the first film that they're notarized for, because it's not, or they're noted for not necessarily their short films and things like that.
Correct.
Their student films. We're going to go with
Great
the big
distinction.
one. Right. So my first choice, Sam Raimi, we've got to go with The Evil Dead. The Evil Dead, 1981. That it. This is. There's not a lot to kind of really go in on as far as plot goes because it is basically what it is. It is a bad night in the woods for five kids. Bruce Campbell and Sandweiss, and and other actors. You basically have these three people: Rob Tapert, Bruce Campbell, and Sam Raimi, who have no money, and they go out in the woods and basically borrow money from Sam Raimi's dad and get this film made. This cheap little 86-minute film of torture and torment of these five kids.
Wow.
A simple effect of just basically $10 strapping a camera to a 2x4 and running through the woods. You've never seen this in a film before. And they take it and make it terror because it's a terror that you never see.
Yeah.
And that's the glory of low budget filmmaking.
Wow. Okay.
And basically what you have is an ambitious filmmaker who loves horror so much he wants to make films with his friends. And that's going to be kind of a theme in the directors that I've chosen.
Okay.
And what you see is, these three guys who basically have known each other all their lives and kind of grow up on making films together. Bruce is the director, Rob Tapert is the producer, and Sam Raimi is the director. With Sam, you get to see his own, because after The Evil Dead, which, this low-budget film makes, well beyond its budget, millions of dollars on screen and drive-in screens and little midnight showings and things like that. It gets a following. And it gets Sam enough credit to where he's able to get more money. And you get his second film, Crime Wave, which no one saw because they gave him money and it just flops terribly. But Sam keeps going, and you see in his him getting better because you see him getting films like Evil Dead 2, which is a horror masterpiece. Evil Dead 1, which was a masterpiece in and of itself, but now Evil Dead 2, when they give him not only free reign to do what he wants to do, but also make a really great horror film. Again, not a whole lot of plot, a cabin, bad things to happen to people in the woods. But then you see him get stuff like Darkman and The Simple Plan and The Quick and the Dead. And you see him taking on these genres, and you see him build his confidence as a director. And finally you give him Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And you give him something that he sinks his teeth into, a franchise that he loves, a hero that he loves, and he brings it to life amazingly. And you get Spider-Man 2, which again, the more of the same. You get a strong story, and you get to see him still applying that horror movie brain into the best part of Spider-Man 2, which is those tentacles reaching out. It was supposed to be the screen test, actually winds up on screen. But you see him keeping that horror movie sensibility, applying it to a big budget film and saying, okay, this works.
Yeah.
And you see him and you see him get that swagger, that confidence as a director, because he's taken on these dark film tales, but also he's taken on, basically having a sense of the cartoon brain and the horror brain, and bringing it together, and making interesting and fun films for movie fans.
Yes.
That not film fans. These are not necessarily highbrow stuff, but definitely movie fans.
Yeah, yeah. That's true that you say that when you say that, because I think when you say horror, I think of, the casting of Willem Dafoe as Green Goblin.
Right.
Because anybody else would have said, well, it's a cartoon villainy type thing. Let's get somebody not so intense and somebody who just, doesn't make it too, dark because the kids might get scared.
Yeah.
But he takes Willem Dafoe, and in that film, I remember just how that look, the menace that he plays with his face, and them just saying, you know what, let's just leave that helmet off. Let's just show his face because that brings it. And that's a horror mindset of saying, hey, what chills you about this?
Yeah. Sam is able to go for the grotesque.
Yes.
And then, but speaking of grotesque, you get Spider-Man 3. and you see Sam's confidence get shook, not because of the film he wanted to make, but because of the film the studios wanted to make.
Yep.
And you see him be forced to make choices which aren't necessarily best for the film.
Yeah.
Venom, when you see the introduction of Venom wasn't his jam, and it's visible.
Yeah.
When Sam gets to make his own choices, when Sam gets to make his own stuff, when Sam gets to do his own thing, he's fantastic.
Yep.
You get to see that. You get to see him kind of get his confidence back in something like Drag Me to Hell.
Yeah.
Which it's a return to form. It's a return to format. It is a solid horror film all the way down. It's fun and it's insane.
Yeah.
And then we go to his last film. The last film that we get before the next one coming out, which I'll get to in a second. But we've got to talk about Oz the Great and Powerful. Now, this is not, in my opinion, a great film.
Okay.
It is a film with promise.
Okay.
You have James Franco taking on the story of the Wizard of Oz, and you see this as a prequel to the Oz stories that we see. We get Mila Kunis as the Wicked Witch of the West, and we see her transformation. We get to see kind of the development and rebuilding of Emerald City. There's basically it kind of applies the Evil Dead style of filmmaking to an already kind of established story with Oz, the L. Frank Baum tales and things like that. What we get is a really bold film visually, but not necessarily a great film structurally.
Yeah.
The characters I don't think you get so much sympathy for, and it feels a little. It feels like talent kind of gets robbed in that, but you get a visually interesting film. I went to go see this on a big screen. I went to see this with, I believe IMAX sound and things like that, IMAX 3D. So you get the power of what Sam can do in a film, but not necessarily what he's capable of when he's directing, I guess, actors. Sam is more a visual director than he is an acting director.
Yeah, which is a good distinction to make.
Yeah, and which leaves when you have fun actors like Bruce Campbell or actors who can do kind of that really strong facial work like Willem Dafoe and things like that, it makes them interesting on screen. When you have actors who aren't necessarily interesting on screen, like for me, James Franco and Mila Kunis, they're fine actors, just they're not necessarily all visually interesting. You got to kind of give them the right projects to do. Yeah. I think, but by the same token, I really want to see what he does with Doctor Strange too, because Sam really has interesting perspective, and he has everything. When you watch a Sam Raimi film, you have to be ready for something to be off kilter. Sam really has mastered shots of being off center, and he's also kind of a director who knows how to kind of disorient you as a movie watcher. I mean, you can see that in The Promise of Evil Dead, and you can see that in the film, and all the way to Oz the Great and Powerful. And I think giving him the budget and giving him the ability to work with Doctor Strange and how far he can stretch that story, I think he's the right director for it. I'm curious. I didn't quite dig the last Doctor Strange film. It wasn't my cup of tea. Yeah. But visually, I'm willing to give Sam that chance because he's such a good director at just getting weird.
Well, and I think that's actually a very powerful benefit to his character so far as a director, because he's been able to say, I'm willing to step outside my comfort zone to go from horror to superhero film. Yeah. I mean, they couldn't be more opposite. And then yet similar in some ways. And so what's interesting is that for me, he's a good case study that if you can do, the horror films like the way he did them, and then if you turn around and do two of the best Spider-Man movies to this day, then yeah, I would say that I am definitely right there with you in saying that, yeah, why not be able to do Doctor Strange, And then with Doctor Strange, because it's, dealing with the mysticism and all that, he could really bring a lot of horror elements to that and
Absolutely.
take that to another level. So I totally see. I think that's great. That's a great pick. The director I went with is probably the oldest director in the world right now that's still alive.
Still working.
Yeah, still working at 91 years old, which you might have to say to him, please sit your butt down at some point, right? And I'm talking about Clint Eastwood. So his very first movie was a movie in 1971 where not only did he direct it, he also starred in it. So how about that? For your first film that you ever direct, you're also going to star in it at the same time. So what kind of skill set is that? But he plays this movie in 1971 was called Play Misty for Me, which is a very interesting film because all of his films before that were Westerns. And this is a thriller, a psychological thriller / crime drama, which has, interestingly enough, which I think you'd like it, has some horror elements in it. So Play Misty is essentially Clint Eastwood's this disc jockey who has this person who calls him every night. This woman is kind of stalking him, and she's like, "Hey, will you play Misty for me? Will you play Misty for me? I'd really love it." And she talks kind of sexy to him and stuff. And then when he comes back from commercial, he always puts the song on for her, and that's the thing that she loves, and always asks him. So he's thinking, okay, that's kind of weird that she does this a lot, but okay, she's a fan. And so then eventually he meets her face to face. They get a couple of drinks. Next thing you know, they're back at her house. They have the one night stand. And then now modern people probably remember the film Fatal Attraction. This was Fatal Attraction before Fatal Attraction, but much bloodier. So this woman decides, and she's played by Jessica Walter, who's from Arrested Development, that series.
Yeah.
She plays Evelyn, and she decides, hey, I'm going to not only just call and ask him to play Misty for me, I'm going to try to see if I can just show up, be around him, be everywhere, give other people the impression that we're in a serious relationship, even though he's trying to date this other woman who he used to have a relationship with, which was played by Donna Mills, and there was a woman named Toby. So he's trying to get back with her. Evelyn's just that one night stand that one time, but she won't go away. And she's willing to do some Gone Girl stuff. That's the other film.
Oh, no.
To try to make Clint Eastwood stay there and be there with him. Now, first of all, this is his directorial debut. So to take on a topic like this when you've just been known as the squinty-eyed cowboy in a Western all these times, that's pretty interesting. Yeah. And then the fact that you're going to direct yourself, which I don't know if that's necessarily the greatest idea. So as a film, what we see here from Mr. Clint Eastwood is that he's also not afraid to lean in to different topics and even difficult topics.
Yeah.
And it somehow works, even though he's still the same guy. He's still very stoic. He's still not the super excitable, goofy guy. He's never that, right? Yeah. He's never that at all. And yet it works. Like you're trying to see him as a disc jockey. Like I tried to see him as a disc jockey first. And I thought, you know what? With the way he's kind of playing this, yeah, I could see that. The guy that's on late at night, very calm dude. It's just telling you his ideas of the world in between songs. So I would say that this film, what was great about it was that the tension is definitely there. It's played well. There's no distracting performances by any of the actors, meaning that they were on their beats. Yeah. And I'll say that his pacing actually was pretty good for a first-time director. I think he kind of had some tracking shots that went a little too long, where it's just walking and talking with him and Evelyn. But that's pretty much the worst of the worst. I mean, if I have to nitpick it, but you know, this is a movie, Case Act, that you just go, wow. And so that's a great start. Now, if we go through his career, we see he's won some awards for some great movies. I mean, He did Gran Torino, which was awesome. He did Millionaire Baby, which was really great. He even did a musical on the story of Frankie Valli, which I actually saw and actually was pretty good, although some people were trying to compare it to the play that was out at that time. Yeah, and it was just kind of like, yeah, this is movie. It's different. You can't make them like a one-to-one comparison, and I really appreciated where he went with it. So to go from there all the way to his latest movie, which was Cry Macho. Now, he's 91 years old, still trying to play a tough guy cowboy, and he's sent on a mission to go get his boss's son, who's now living with his mom down in Mexico, and they're in Texas. And so who sends a 91-year-old former rodeo cowboy with a bad back to go down in some rough terrain to go get his son? And it was just ridiculous. It was like he was trying to do Gran Torino again, because it's called Cry Macho, where he's supposed to be telling him life lessons about it, what it means and all this stuff, to the boy. But it just didn't connect at all. And it was almost like you were saying, Clint, come on. And then seeing older women or other women in the film still falling for him as if he was a young Clint Eastwood. A 91-year-old broke-back cowboy who's a rodeo guy. Really? Seriously? They're still just falling for you? Like they don't see all them wrinkle lines and stuff? It was just not believable. So to me, this trajectory for him went way high, higher than anybody would ever think he would get to with $1 Million Baby, stuff like that. But this is probably a case of know when to say when.
Yeah.
Because Cry Macho was absolutely horrible.
Yeah. Clint as a director knows how to get the most out of an understated performance. As a you take him as a director, and none of his characters really go over the top. I mean, you haven't really seen him have over the top characters since Outlaw Josie Wales.
Yeah. Yeah.
My personal favorite Clint Eastwood film has got to be Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil.
Oh,
as far as the director goes.
Yeah.
The most over the top is the Lady Chablis. And that's just because the Lady Chablis is the Lady Chablis. Like he's taking a real life person from this case and injecting it into this fictional retelling of this story, this case.
Mm-hmm.
But he gets so much out of his actors in that film.
Yes.
But again, it's always understated performances. It's never over the top unless it's meant to be. Clint Eastwood has always understood the economy of screen time.
Yes.
That the theory that less is more.
Yes.
He's embracing it in his acting, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the guy who, not only does Unforgiven, he's also done Any Which Way But Loose.
Yes.
Which you got a man and his monkey.
Yeah.
You've got to give him credit for doing what he does, because he does know how to kind of get people in touch with that inner person, whatever that role is.
Yes.
But by the same token, he's come a long way as far as direction goes. He definitely has an eye for framing, but more importantly, he is an actor's director.
Yes. All day.
And that's really, really important in the fact that he understands the economy of what it means to have screen time count, and have lines count, and have pacing count. He's still a great director, even if he's kind of gotten a little self-indulgent over the past couple of years.
Yeah, it's true.
Between The Mule and Cry Macho, and
those
Gran
two.
Torino, and just it's not necessarily the best way to end a career, but by the same token, he's Clint Eastwood, and you're going to tell him no?
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I agree with you. The last two films, I would agree with you on that. They're definitely horrible. The Mule, you're just surprised that someone just didn't step up and tell him, hey, that doesn't connect. That's a really long way of going about saying this one thing. You're in a mindset world today that's very quick, that needs things quickly and fast, and you could have done that in a completely different way. I did love the story in Gran Torino. I really thought that was if out of his last set of films, I think Gran Torino was the best, and then after that, he fell off with everything after that. And I would say that what's so great about Eastwood too is he understands, and you said this already, just the still shot, pulled up close, actor's face.
Yep.
Whether they're doing dialogue or not, but especially when they're not doing dialogue, he knows how to catch it to where he doesn't hold it too long, to where you're going, why is he sitting here with this close-up shot? We get it, back up. No, he understands that sometimes that facial acting, which he's made a career on, is something he would hold as something that's cornerstone for his actors, and he lets his actors breathe. So the movie that doesn't get any credit at all, I think, is The Jersey Boys. Yeah. It's actually a great film adaptation from that play that was running, and the singers nailed their parts. They could actually sing as well as do the acting pieces, and there's just the deconstruction of Frankie Valli and the humor of the rest of the guys in the band, and to be able to hold both tensions at the same time and still tell a cohesive story, I think that's underrated, but it's really great.
And one more thing that he really does well is the embracing of the character actors.
Yes.
He really, whoever his cinematographer is, his cinematographers know how to how to get the lines out of those faces and light them properly. I mean, you take a look at the lighting in Outlaw Josie Wales, or you look at the panning shots in Midnight at the Garden of Good and Evil. You look at how he's able to not only take his star but also bounce them off the character actors in there.
Yes.
He really knows kind of how to get the most out of those people too, which is fun to watch, and that's what makes his film so interesting.
Yes.
Is he gets the most out of his actors.
He definitely does, and that's a key component of having, well, as we know, the opposite of that would be George Lucas and how he tries to talk to his actors. We saw what that did.
We didn't choose Lucas for a reason for this show. George Lucas does not show up in this film. Does not show up today.
What's another one for you, K-Zach?
Okay, so the next one that I picked, I had to go with good old QT Quentin Tarantino. Now,
okay,
we to understand where Quentin comes from, we got to go back to the early 1990s, where we're seeing kind of independent cinema come up. And you kind of have to take a look not only in... I'll mention Lucas in the fact that when you talk about Lucas, you have to talk about the class of directors that he came up with, because he's coming up with Spielberg, he's coming up with Coppola, he's coming up with, a class of directors that even Kubrick, who kind of embrace the spectacle of film. Quentin Tarantino comes from a class of directors that kind of really more embraces the independent scene, because you've got guys like Kevin Smith, you've got guys like Robert Rodriguez, you've got that class of directors who are not only directors but also writer-directors.
Yes.
And so we've got to take a look at his first film, which is, of course, Reservoir Dogs. You get this incredible crime drama, and you don't necessarily have the heist itself as the center.
Yes.
You have the framing of the characters around the heist. Yeah. And you have the build of these characters not necessarily pulling off the job, but but the prologue and the aftermath of the job. And he picks 6 or 7 solid actors to deliver his whip-smart dialogue, which, like I said, when you talk about his first writing project, he's responsible for the draft behind Natural Born Killers, which eventually Oliver Stone develops. Yes. But what you get with this film is you get him playing with time, and you get him playing with timing, and you get him bouncing back and forth in between these dramatic shots, and you get the violence and the gore. You have grotesque comedy, and you have desperate lighting in desperate situations, and you have you see him kind of taking on shots where you kind of get lost in the shot, like he's got some faraway shots in the warehouse of Mr. Pink, and it's not necessarily visually interesting. But you also get some really kind of weird close-up panning shots, like the scene where Mr. Orange, I think it's Mr. Orange, in the bathroom with the cops.
Yeah.
You get kind of you see the slow motion drying of the hands, the barking of the dogs, the close-ups on the detectives and things like that. You go, okay, this is getting interesting, and you kind of get lost in the shots and the pan cuts and things like that. He's doing his best in this film to be visually interesting, and it doesn't necessarily serve the film. But also you're getting some really great dialogue, and you're getting some really kind of wonderful bouncing off of characters. You're seeing him develop, not necessarily because he's an immature filmmaker, but he's also a really almost accomplished writer. And you get kind of a master class in what it means to have tough guy dialogue.
Yeah.
And you get some really strong character actors in this. You get Chris Penn, Steve Buscemi, Harvey Keitel.
Why do I have to be Mr. Pink?
Exactly. You're always You're Mr. Pink on this job. I got 9 guys to be Mr. Black. This is Joe in it's fantastic.
Yes.
It really shows the promise of a filmmaker. And so we kind of go into his next films, Pulp Fiction, and you see him playing with time again, and you see him playing with bold directing choices and things like that. And you know, you give him other people's material like Jackie Brown, and then you see him kind of grow into not only his delivering other people's dialogue but his as well. And you get the Kill Bill trilogy or the Kill Bill 2 films, which should be a trilogy by this point. We're still waiting. We're still waiting. You get something that, you know, doesn't quite land, but is still his love of a certain type of film in Death Proof, him working with Robert Rodriguez, and you see him pop up in little stuff like Sin City and things like that. And we finally get to his most recent film. And that is, of course, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah.
This is where he lands. I personally love this film. Because of the way that he's able to capture the Hollywood that he loves, and he's able to retell the story of the Manson family, and just kind of give his own retaking on history and things like that, like he did in Inglourious Bastards and things like that.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily meant to be taken seriously, but it's an ode to what he loves. And that's the thing that Quentin Tarantino has always been. He has always been true to what he loves. And again, I've said this before on the show, is that good artists borrow, great artists steal. And basically, I kind of look at Quentin Tarantino as Wikipedia.
Okay.
And the fact that it should be the place where you start your research, but if you're going to go into it, go into his source material, because you've got to go see, if you liked Kill Bill, check out Game of Death. If you liked Kill Bill, check out Lady Snowblood. If you like Death Proof, check out stuff like Dirty Mary Crazy Larry, or whatever it's called.
It's one of those.
Yeah,
Just filth.
Yeah, check out Vanishing Point. Check out these films that made him as a filmmaker, because he is still that video clerk referring you to all these great titles, and getting you and Quentin Tarantino, not only as a director but also as a producer, because he's producing stuff and getting stuff out again like Switchblade Sisters and things like that. He's waking you up to these really cool things that he really dug, and like, hey, if you like this in my movie, you should see this film. He's always leading you down a path to what's fun in that era of film. He has certainly grown up as a director. He's grown out as a director, but he's never necessarily grown up, and that's what always makes him fun as a director for me.
Yeah, no, yeah. QT, when he came on the scene, he just totally said, look, there is a different way to do this stuff, and I'm doing it my way, and I'm unapologetic about it.
Yep.
And here we go. And so everybody likes that rebel every now and again, because sometimes the rebels, the contrarians, keep things from getting too dull. And then it gets people to wake up to say, hey, look, did you realize that there's another way to shoot this and another way to do this that may not be perfect in textbook, but still works?
Yeah.
And so I like it. He just kept pushing boundaries on things like this. And to some people, they were a little upset by it. And other people, they said, nah, they could see the genius in it. And they just wanted to see what he might do next.
Yeah. Quentin Tarantino is not a director that's going to make everyone happy.
Nope.
But Quentin Tarantino is going to certainly make people that watch his movies very happy.
Yeah.
And that's why he's worth watching every single time. He's one of those directors where anytime one of his films is on, I can instantly turn it on and just be transported in at any point in the film, because it's always interesting.
No, that's exactly right. And so the interesting thing here in my next one is, so since the first one I went with is probably the oldest and longest tenured director, I went the opposite direction here with the gentleman you might know as, well, it's Ryan Coogler. So a lot shorter filmography and completely different, very young, very fresh mind. And so his first film came out in 2013. It was a movie that's an American biographical drama that was based on a true story of a guy named Oscar Grant. And so this is a great film in that he's got Michael B. Jordan, who he loves to stick with because he has him in almost every one of his films.
Right.
And this is a story. This is interesting because he didn't just direct this; he also wrote this one. And the film's a little shorter than most films. It's about an hour and 30 minutes. But you enjoy spending time seeing what does Oscar Grant do, a guy who spent some time in San Quentin prison for a crime, and now he's back. He's out, and he's trying to figure out, well, how do I live a clean life? Because I realized that didn't work.
This is Fruitvale Station, right?
Yes, Fruitvale Station, right. And so he's deciding, okay, well, I've already done the time. Now let me just try to go be the real father to my daughter and be the real boyfriend, husband to my wife, who I left behind. And this is basically him going through life as the guy with a stain on him, even though he's trying to do well. He's trying to do good. He's trying to go back off those old ways that got him in trouble. And so you're rooting for him. So he's automatically a sympathetic character. What I love with Ryan Coogler is that there's always a relationship between dad and son in his movies, or the guy who's going to be a dad and who's got daughters or sons underneath him, right? There's always that dynamic. You saw it in Black Panther, right? You see it in Creed because he's Apollo Creed's son in Creed, right? So there's that dynamic here, but this is great because the tension and the drama, he lets you sit in it. He lets the actors show you the anguish. He doesn't rush them. The scenes aren't cut too quickly, in my opinion. And it's not so much about how well this is shot. It's more about how well what's captured is captured. And so in a movie like this where a guy totally gets done wrong in the last scene of the movie and his life is ended in a very sad way, you are bought into the idea of the second chance. You want to see Oscar Grant get a second chance. He paid his dues, right? He went to jail for it. He went to prison for it. Now, how is he going to support this lovely wife and this daughter who looks up to him like he's the greatest thing, even though he's been to prison? And he's trying to work through that, even though there's still some hood in him, right? And just that tension. And, this is something you'll see a lot of people coming from, lower socioeconomic backgrounds. They're like, how do I flip a script that I lived more that way? And then the rest of my life, I lived in prison. So what does the good, clean, new version of me look like going out there? And so there's stumbles, and then you get back up again, and you walk, and then you stumble somewhere else, and you get back up again. Then there's things that happen beyond your control that are not your fault, but because wrong place, wrong time, trouble. Right. And so him holding that tension and letting you see this, you really do feel for Michael B. Jordan's character, Oscar Grant. You really are saying, and Michael B. is doing a phenomenal job. He's stepping up. He's showing you that he's got more chops than you actually know. And so then this is, of course, before the Black Panther physique, but he's always been kind of a guy like that. Yeah. So then this is how he starts. He starts with a movie like that. He wins a bunch of significant awards for this particular film, and people want to see what more is he going to do. So what does he do next? He does Creed. And everybody's going, oh, really? Another Rocky movie? Do we really need? But here you get a fresh take because he wrote it and said, hey, Sly, what if we did it this way? What if we took it from the perspective of not here's another Rocky movie based on Rocky? What if it's the son, notice again that father-son thing, of one of his opponents? Yeah. How would Rocky feel about that? And then how would that go down? And so once again, Michael B. Jordan is playing this hard luck kid because he didn't get to really know his dad, and he kind of spoiled a little bit, but he wants to pick up that legacy of what his dad left off. He wants to be a fighter, but he's mostly attitude and not skill. And he's hoping that just his name will carry him over. And so having Rocky be a guy who actually got nominated for Best Supporting Actor in this, helping us see another side of Sylvester Stallone as the teacher, as opposed to just the guy that walks in, you barely understand what he's saying. Here he's really being the Yoda to Michael B. Jordan's upstart Luke Skywalker, if you will. Right. And they're clashing just the same way as you would see in
a new take on an old film.
Yes. And so that was great. So then you get to his most latest film. So what's the latest film that he's done? Now he's written and produced. This is how brilliant he is. He's written and produced other films. So he gets writing credit, some writing credit and some producing credit with Judas and the Black Messiah, which is an absolutely fantastic film. But his latest film that he directed would have been Black Panther, 2018. And we know what that movie did for his career, for all the actors who maybe people didn't know of very well, the costume design, the settings, everything else, the idea that he put Africa on the map with a Marvel movie and said, listen, let's tell a story from a different perspective that also has ties to America. Right, so tying that up with Watts in California and the stuff that was going on wrong here, and then what was invariably wrong with a great city like Wakanda, which you would think they have everything. There couldn't be any problems, but there were. And again, you see that father-son problem between both Killmonger and his dad, mainly that his dad died, and then in Black Panther and his dad, where he just says, why would you hold back a deep secret like this? Yeah. So for a change, a Marvel movie actually gets deep and hits some real deep themes. In fact, I was very surprised that Marvel would let Ryan Coogler do this and show how the African-American Black response and then the African response, which sometimes a lot of times they're at odds with each other because they don't understand each other's background because they have two different backgrounds to that degree. So that the fact that was in a Marvel movie, and he still made it fun and all that good stuff that Marvel would say okay. Mm-hmm. I mean, really? And this is his third film.
Yeah. Coogler is important in the fact that he's proving something that Hollywood's been trying to fight for years, is that mainstream audiences are ready to see stories of Black men and have majority Black casts and still go to them. He gets that strong start with Fruitvale Station, and again, you could say that he's trotting on familiar ground, but by the same token, he's telling a really, really deep and tragic story.
Yes,
but you also see him deliver on such promise as a writer director. Again, like I said, going back to what Tarantino was, someone so dedicated to what's going on screen that he wants to not only produce the words but also get it on film.
Yes,
and Coogler is really important for this, and so you see him delivering. Again, like going back to Sam Raimi, you get to see someone who really believes in this particular character and delivering it on screen, strong, powerful, and getting it in front of audiences, and people eat it up.
Yes,
Coogler is important because he's showing such promise and he's already got an eye for such visuals and such strong and getting such strong acting. It's really interesting and important to have this guy in the Hollywood system at this time because he's proving the point that people are ready for these stories to be told, and getting them on screen and getting audiences in front of them. Even if it is with the Disney machine, it's still really important.
Absolutely, because this is one thing you can't take from him. You can't take that from him, and the fact that he was able to do that. Because remember, Marvel decided, or Kevin Feige decided that Ava DuVernay would not be good for this, and that's because Ava DuVernay did Selma, and she's serious. She would not have done it comic booky at all, and so they said, "Nah, we can't do that."
And they gave her they gave her a shot with A Wrinkle in Time.
Yes, they did. They did give her that, but with the Marvel property, they were like, this particular Marvel property, they said no, because this topic is so deep when you talk about Black Panther and then the roots and then the Black Panthers themselves, which is also mentioned in the film. They slipped that in. They did all this Black history moments are in there. They show on the TV screen, you see Rodney King being beaten when they're at his dad's house, Killmonger's dad's house. So you get the sense of why he's ginned up about wanting to protect and be this kind of activist. So yes, the fact that he was able to do all that and still produce something that Marvel would, again, the guy shows layers. Can't wait to see more. And so, Zach, with that, who's your last pick?
My last pick is, again, a fairly new director, for all intents and purposes, and that is going to be Edgar Wright. Edgar Wright is a director who started in television and was able to move on to films. And the first film that we get to see of his is Shaun of the Dead. He goes back with grabbing Simon Pegg and Nick Frost from his sitcom Spaced and delivering a really, really strong and fun zombie film. Again, I got to touch on zombies last week with our show and got to touch on the Dead. But talking Edgar Wright as director, he is, again, as I've said with the other two last shows, he's a fanboy who really loved film so much that he wanted to make him himself. And you get to see him bring out this great zombie tale, going with Romero rules and bringing forth a British sensibility and applying it to a really comedic performance
Yes.
in the film. Shaun of the Dead delivers its beats, and it delivers its format, and it delivers on everything that a zombie film should be, and everything that a comedy wants to be. You get, strong friendship dynamics. You get whip smart dialogue. You get basically two slackers who have no business being the heroes of this movie, and it's funny and it's brilliant. And getting fun actors who normally wouldn't be on screen, centered on there, and giving them their chance to shine, like Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, who in and of themselves are fantastically funny. Giving them the opportunity to shine with his material, it's fantastic.
Wow.
And Shaun of the Dead is such a strong film, and it's a strong debut. And so it gets him to the Cornetto trilogy, because his next film is Hot Fuzz, taking the police action story and putting it in a small town in Britain, and it delivers so well. The World's End, not exactly his strong film, but still has great moments. And again, just basically a very British sensibility on an sci-fi alien story. So you see that he's taking these genres, putting a British spin on them, and making them kind of interesting and fun. And then we get to Baby Driver, which the first 15 minutes of this film is glorious on screen. And you get to hear the story of him hearing a song when he was like 10. John Spencer Blues Explosion. Bell Bottoms said, "I'm going to put that in a movie one day." And he does. And he delivers this great, tense action driving drama.
Wow.
And like I said, his Ant-Man had so much promise, even though it didn't get delivered. But finally, we get to his most recent film, and that's Last Night in Soho. Last Night in Soho is his ode to Giallo, and it's his ode to the mod 60s of Britain. And you get him delivering these great, brilliant fashion choices, and you get him delivering this really kind of strange ghost story, and him playing with time and playing with different actors. It's not necessarily his strongest for acting choices, but it's strong in the visuals, and it's strong in the way that he sets up shots in the film. There's some great tracking shots through clubs in the 60s, and he gets to balance color and music and things like that. So you get to see him not necessarily delivering the strongest film, but you get him delivering promise. And again, always applying that British sensibility to it, which I think has been something that we've been missing in film for a while, because we had that with Terry Gilliam for a while. And he's another one I could have chose for this, but he's kind of fallen off, and I hadn't seen Man Who Killed Don Quixote quite yet. So like I said, it wasn't one I could chose. I went with Edgar because he's a guy who went from television to films, delivers fanboy stuff, which is for me absolutely phenomenal. But more importantly, he's got a brilliant mind for filmmaking, and I really get excited about what he's going to do next, because anything that he's on top of is something that I want to see. I still need to see Sparks Brothers, his documentary. I really, but like I said, what he delivers, he delivers fun for me as a film goer. He's a guy who, for me, makes the movie going experience interesting. Yeah. And that's why I really like getting behind him and watching what he does.
Yes, I love that. Well, with that same breath of fresh air, I would say the same about my guy, who is Ridley Scott. So his first film was in 1977, and it was a British historical drama called The Duelist, which was based off of a book. I think it was John Conrad. And here you have Harvey Keitel and Keith Carradine as these main characters. And so the short of it is, you've got this guy, Harvey Keitel, who's a badass in the army, and he ends up taking out somebody that's important to somebody else who's, in terms of there being a blood relation to this person, who's a governor. So he sends in Keith Carradine to come in and say, all right, well, you're going to have to be the kind of badass to go in and go get this dude because he's pretty, this guy is a general. He's badass. So we got to send another badass to go get him. And so what this basically does is sets up this deal where now these guys are in this feud for the next 15 to 20 years where whenever they see each other, they decide it's time to duel. And they start off dueling with fencing. And then they move up to actual swords, and then it even gets down to guns. And so this is a very interesting film in that it had won, best debut film at the 1977 Cannes Award, in France, because it's covering these two French soldiers, even though it's in British history as to what happened to Napoleon and that sort of thing. And so it's interesting film in that, there's no CGI, but that swordplay is actually a lesson for any of the movies that's trying to do action because they're able to do it with fencing, they're able to do it with swords, they're able to do it with gunplay. And again, you have to think about this. This is no CGI. So and the choreography has to be on point because you can't really fake a sword hit that as well as you could maybe a punch, because you got the clanging and the sounds of the sword and everything else. And so it's a very interesting thing. So from a psychological perspective, it's interesting because you got a guy who says, all I know how to do is duel. That's me. And then you got another guy that says, but I got to be the best at it. So there's no way you're going to beat me. And so they take turns injuring each other enough to where they have to say, all right, till next time, you got me here. I got to heal. Because it wasn't a hatred. It was more of a thing of you're standing in my way type thing from what I'm trying to do. And then because they're both so good, they have to have this battle over and over and over again. So on one hand, it seems kind of silly because you're kind of going, how many times are they going to fight each other? It's kind of stupid that they just randomly run into each other and then have to get into a big fight over something. And yeah, I can see that kind of knock on it, if you will, or nitpick of it. But what you see here with Ridley Scott immediately is look at the way he pulls back and shoots the scope. Because if you're going to show swinging swords on stuff, you will kill that if you're up too close, right? So you have to get great backgrounds. You have to shoot in great locations, which you see he's already got that right away.
Absolutely.
In his first film, here in 77, this is the year of Star Wars, by the way, which is also swords, just to put that in there real quick. So that's where he starts. And so he's already getting kind of awarded for that. And then, he goes through, he does Alien 2 years later in 79, and then Thelma and Louise. I mean, there's so many great films. Gladiator. He just cranked out hit after hit after hit and film after film after film. And then we get to his last film, which is House of Gucci, which came out here pretty recently. So it was 2021. This was a 2-hour and 38-minute movie. Now, this is a movie, it's tough for me because I'm not really a big fashion guy knowing all the stuff that about Gucci. But here's a guy with a $7 million production budget who says, okay, I need to tell the story of how someone marries into the Gucci family and her ambition is stronger than theirs. And she's pushing buttons and causing class wars inside the family against each other, which is this tension. And so you got Lady Gaga, Adam Driver, Jared Leto, Jeremy Irons, Selma Hayek, and Al Pacino in this film. So you got a great cast. My issue, though, was it that the cast saved this movie in a sense because of their powered performances? Or was this just something that he just kind of happened to just say, let me tell this story, and it's a new story that we haven't seen in a way, and kind of turned it on its head and said, hey, here's how we could look at this and make this interesting. For me, it didn't work just because I don't really care about this topic at all.
Yeah.
So it was hard for me to get into it, and just to see a family fighting over millions and riches, it's not quite the same. In terms of them fighting each other over it. So again, I don't think it was a bad movie. Again, Ridley was awesome here, but I would say out of all the films that he's made, this is probably one of the lowest amount of interest for me. I don't know. What did you see this film, or did you?
I did not, but again, Ridley has something going for him that he's always had. Two things that make him notable. Number one is that he understands what it means to put spectacle on screen.
Yes.
Whether that's the big arenas in Gladiator or a small capsule in Alien. Mm-hmm. He knows how to put spectacle on screen. That's what he's never lost. Yes. You take a look at stuff like The Duelist, or you take a look at I think it was G.I. Jane.
Mm.
You take a look at how he's able to put spectacle on screen. The second thing that Ridley understands is combative nature of people at odds.
Yes. Oh
He
yeah.
knows how to put combat on screen, whether it's verbal or whether it's visual and physical. He knows how to make that jarring, but also keep your eyes on that screen. Ridley is such a strong filmmaker with what he does because what he puts on screen is captivating.
Yes.
Even if you're not terribly interested in the story of House of Gucci, you're still drawn to the visuals of the actors, or you're still drawn to, watching this sweeping arc of of finance and high fashion and things like that. Your eyes are drawn to it because he understands what it means to put that on screen.
Yes.
He knows how to keep those odds on screen. He knows how to keep these actors kind of fighting through the whole thing. So you're either with them or you're against them. It's not he deals in absolutes because he understands kind of the gray area, but he also understands the black and white, and he makes it just visually strong.
Yeah.
And when you see his stuff on screen, it's unmistakably his because he knows how to capture all of it.
Yes.
And that's what makes him such a notable filmmaker, because he knows how to capture all of it on screen.
Yeah, whenever you see a Ridley Scott film, there's a bigness to it that you sense just in the first frame.
Yeah.
Like, this is going to be something spectacular. It's not like, okay, let me wait and see a good scene. No, almost right off the bat, from the beginning from Jump Street, he's already got you understanding that this is going to be a lot larger than you imagine. It's by what he chooses to shoot first, what he chooses to keep in the frame, and then how he continues to move that dialogue between the combating, like you said. So I absolutely love that. I think the only thing that could have saved this film, or maybe make it more universal to people, I don't know what you could have done. Like, as I think about it, Adam Driver's hot right now, and Lady Gaga has impressed some people, and of course Jared Leto is just Jared Leto. People have one way or the other about him, but having Pacino and then Jeremy Irons and then Salma Hayek, who they hadn't seen in a while, it's like, this seems believable. This seems like a cast that could work together and could carry something forward. Yeah. So I don't know. You can't have all your movies be hits and be great. So this is just probably the one that he has that isn't, up to scope compared to maybe the others. Yeah. And I wouldn't say it's because he didn't put in the work, and it wasn't because his style didn't work. It's just who asked for a film like this in the first place, and then if you do get it, how many people really know this family or this story that well? They really don't. So you're having to really
people in our circle, not necessarily so. Yeah. But people who, follow high fashion, people who follow high finance and things like that. Yeah. That's the story that they want to see. We live in kind of the Shonda Rhimes and the what's the guy who who did like American Horror Story and Glee and things like that. I can't remember. It's Ryan Murphy. Ryan Murphy. We live in an era where these people are making the interesting stuff we're seeing, and that's an interesting story for that audience.
Yes.
It may not necessarily be for us, but he's still delivering a spectacular story. Yeah. And like I said, one of my favorite Ridley Scott films is a film that not everyone likes, and it was Hannibal. Gary Oldman's brilliant in it. You see that combat with Julianne Moore going into the ambush of the drug dealer at the top of the film. That's Ridley Scott all over the place.
For sure.
It's not necessarily the strongest movie, and it gets a really goofy, but that's more the book in and of itself, not necessarily Scott's filmmaking. Mm-hmm. The film in and of itself is visually interesting, and that's what he's always been, is visually interesting, and that's what makes him a long-lasting person in Hollywood, is because his stuff is always interesting to see.
I agree. I think that is fantastic. Well, what did you guys think? We just gave you just 3 directors that we had been following pretty closely. So, who are your favorite directors and how did they start and where are they now? Tell us in the comment section. And yeah, I'd love to have that conversation with you. I'm sure Kazak would as well.
Of course.
So, at this time, we are ready to go into our shout outs. And then from there, we'll tell you that this is a good series. If you really like this Then and Now series, we also have a version of this for actors. And we could do this for screenplays, we could do it for anything, but definitely actors and actresses next. So definitely be in tow for that. So who are you shouting out to?
I do just want to go ahead and shout out who I always shout out to. That is our friends here at DallasOnAir.com. Do check out all the other shows that are on our network. Do check out stuff like Best for Business. Check out Say Something. Do check out Figments and Explained Mysteries podcast and Fan and Wife with Eddie and Colleen Medina. Do also check out, of course, our alternating show, which is the Rancor Pit Live, our Star Wars show with Cole Houston, and Isle of Toys, again with Cole Houston, where we talk about toy collecting. We've always got something interesting for you here in DallasOnAir.com. Do check us out. Make us your friend on Facebook. Always tune into the channel. And like I said, just stay tuned to what we have to offer because we've got something for everyone right here in DallasOnAir.com.
Absolutely. The show is called Fulfillment. So we're definitely trying to find out what gives you fulfillment and then talk about it because that's the best conversation you can probably have when you talk about fulfilling things versus the things that piss you off. So my shout outs go out to that husband and wife team of Brandy and Barry Austin. They're big movie fans. So big shout out to them. Sean Presley, Lauren Wiedauer, Tristan Frazier, good friend, Harry Thomas, also a YouTuber, Prem, a YouTuber, Troy Ross, Daniel Meza, Freddie, and you know who you are, Freddie, Eddie Medina, Cole Houston, of course, is always a good friend, Stephanie Crane, and of course, I would be remiss if I didn't mention Carlos Salinas, also known to you as the film Samurai.
And also shout outs to Horror Mike for coming in and then knocking out of the park last week with the zombies episode. So thank you to him,
absolutely. Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you. That's a wonderful value add to the show, and we love having him here, and you guys do too, and that's why we're going to continue to bring him back. Well, with that, I think we're out of here, and we'll see y'all soon.
Deuces.